want to welcome everybody to the gorgeous former city library here, now known as the World Food Prize. And we're proud to host the third meeting of the State, Local, and Tribal Leaders Task Force on Climate Preparedness and Resilience. It's been sort of a two-day meeting. The task force itself is meeting right now today. Yesterday we had a local stakeholders meeting, folks from around Iowa, and to talk about some of the issues that are pertinent to and specific to climate change and some of the things that we can do. So we had the business community, we had educators from across the state, and a couple of speakers from out of state. But this has been a really great meeting. We are in this third meeting beginning to shape recommendations to go to the White House, and we are proud that Des Moines was chosen, and quite frankly the Heartland was chosen governor to have it. Their impacts are evident in the heartland as well as in the coastal regions. The climate change affects not only flooding and water quality issues, but it also affects crop yields and other things like that. So I, as the host of this meeting, want to again thank everybody for coming and participating and moving this agenda forward. Quickly I want to bring our next presenter up, and it's Michael Boots. He's the White House, actually the head of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and so moving right ahead, Michael Boots.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Cownie, his team, and the City of Des Moines for hosting this task force here for the last few days. It's been a productive morning so far, and as I said earlier, it's always an honor to spend time with a set of folks who are really responding to the threat of climate change with an amazing amount of creativity and leadership. I'm talking, of course, about leaders like Mayor Cownie, who has just done an amazing amount of work here for the City of Des Moines, working with businesses and local leaders on issues to expand sustainability work of the city, to really advance renewable energy and energy consumption, but also to prepare for the impacts of climate change. And he has been a real leader when it comes to, particularly on issues of flooding, working on the impacts of both communities and the infrastructure of this area, both in the urban setting of Des Moines, but also in the working rural lands throughout the state. And so real thanks to him for his leadership on that. As co-chairs of President Obama's State, Local, and Tribal Leaders Task Force on Preparedness and Resilience, David Agnew and I get the opportunity to travel around and see other great examples like Mayor Cownie, who are just taking real leadership on this issue. Just a few weeks ago, I was with another task force member, Governor Shumlin in Vermont, where I was able to see some of the impacts from Hurricane Irene a few years ago. And still today, there are communities and businesses and livelihoods that have been very disrupted by that storm. But under the governor's leadership, they are really working hard to rebuild stronger and smarter and safer, and so that they are ready for the next storm. And better safety, a sense of security when the next storm comes, that's what climate change resilience is really all about when it comes to communities. And when folks from various levels of government like us get together to talk about this, there can be a lot of technical information discussed. There's some complicated funding programs. There's way too many acronyms. But at the end of the day, what it's really about is making sure that communities are safer and healthier. Farmers want to make sure that they protect their land from invasive plants and from extreme heat, so that the food supply that we all rely on is secure. And parents want to know more about the impacts of climate change on the health of their children. And so the work of the leaders who are standing here around me really, really matters at this point. And just last week, the White House released the latest National Climate Assessment, which makes clear that the impacts of climate change are being felt today, and they're being felt in every region of the country and in every sector of the economy. And that's why the president talks about climate change as a here and now issue, not something that future generations will need to deal with, but rather something that's here already, that's already affecting all of us. And so with that, I will turn this over to David Agnew, who's the President's Director of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you so much to Mayor Frank Cownie for hosting us here. I also want to thank the citizens of Des Moines and the citizens of Iowa for having us here. We take these trips, as Mike said, and one of the great benefits of these trips is to go out and see what individual communities are doing to respond to the impact of climate change. And I noticed yesterday, I don't know if it was just good timing by the mayor, but the city of Des Moines was recognized yesterday as a 3-star community. I saw that as I was coming into Des Moines. So congratulations to this city for its leadership and all that it's doing and teaching other communities across the country how to do it. I want to point out that the President's State, Local, and Tribal Leaders Task Force on Climate Preparedness and Resilience is a unique platform. These types of groups don't get together every day, where you have the federal government, state government, county, city, and tribal government all sitting at the same table trying to figure out how to work better together. We have 8 governors, 14 mayors, 2 county officials, and 2 tribal leaders all working hard to figure out how we collectively as a nation need to respond to the impacts of climate change. And as Mike said, we think this work is extremely important. In 2012 alone, extreme weather cost America over $110 billion. In my work at the White House, every single day we're working with governors, with mayors, with tribal leaders and county officials to figure out how to deal with that. And so these leaders around the country aren't sitting around debating the issue. They're taking action on the issue, and they're trying to figure out how to make their communities more resilient. That creativity, that innovation is occurring all over this country, and the real work of this task force is to take that innovation and that work that's going on at the local level and to accelerate it and to make the federal government a better partner for all those levels of government trying to do the right thing. So that's why we're here. That's why we have such a great collection of federal officials from throughout the federal government here, because this issue is extremely important. We're pleased to be talking about these actions, and we're looking forward to a great discussion as it continues this afternoon. And with that, it's my honor to introduce the United States Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell.
Thank you, David, and it is a true pleasure to be here in this LEED Platinum building, and congratulations to Des Moines for having this structure retaining its historic character, but also telling a story about what we can do at a local level as well as a national level about walking softer on the planet. I have been impressed by the amount of commitment and effort of all the leaders that are here at every level of government: Alaska Natives, American Indians, local governments, county governments, and a number of state governments that are working together with members of the federal family to say, how do we deal with this big challenge that we're facing in climate change? I'm a business person, 35 years in the private sector, just a year and a bit in the public sector. But I know as a business person that no company, no individual can go it alone. That if we're going to chart a course for our planet that's better for our children than the one that we have given them, we must act now, and we must act as a team, because sustainability and addressing climate change is a team sport. So that's what this is all about. It's about sharing the knowledge and wisdom that we've all gained on the ground. It's about sharing the science that we have so that we have a single version of the truth and it's available to everyone. And it's about listening to the perspectives of those who are managing these lands, and in some cases have been managing these lands in harmony with the environment for thousands of years, that we can learn from as we chart a path forward. So I am so impressed with the public servants who are in this process on this task force that are providing advice to federal officials like me and my teammates on what we can do to be part of the solution in the future. So it's great to listen to them. It's really wonderful to read their words, and more importantly, to figure out what we can do to work together efficiently and effectively to address this issue of climate change. So thank you for this warm welcome to Des Moines. It is just a great opportunity for me to see what's happening in this state, and I'll be heading from here out to a wildlife refuge where they're doing some great work with the agricultural community on prairie strips of grasslands interspersed with the row crops to learn more about how we can take care of our ecosystems and our water quality and habitat for fish and aquatic animals, while also supporting the agricultural economy that's not only important here, but important to all of our stomachs. So with that, I want to turn the podium over to my colleague and friend, the President's Key Science Advisor and the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. John Holdren. John.
Well, thank you, Secretary Jewell, and let me echo the thanks of the preceding speakers to Mayor Cownie and the City of Des Moines. It's really been a pleasure to be here and be part of this meeting of the Task Force on Climate Change Preparedness and Resilience, the task force of state, local, and tribal leaders. I want to say just a word about the National Climate Assessment, already mentioned by Mike Boots, released last week. This is the third assessment of climate change impacts on the United States, first completed in 2000, the second completed in 2009. We've spent the last 4 years working on this one. 300 authors, overseen by a 60-person federal advisory committee that included representatives of the private sector, oil companies, chemical companies, electric utilities, but also a very substantial number of academic experts in climate change, non-governmental organizations. The review process was extraordinary. 3-month public comment period. Document was reviewed by all of the 13 agencies that are part of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The document comes in 3 flavors: a 20-page overview document, a 140-page highlights document, and an 840-page document that exists only on the web. The thing that is, I think, most important and indeed unique about this assessment is it is unprecedented in the degree of regional granularity. It separates the United States into 8 different geographic regions, and it looks at how climate change is happening and is likely to continue to happen in different ways in all 8 regions. It also looks at specific impacts on different sectors of the economy: the energy sector, the agriculture sector, ocean fisheries, infrastructure, and so on. And what is so important about that is that while climate change is a global phenomenon, the impacts are all local, and they vary locally. And unless and until people understand how climate change is impacting their community, how it's impacting where they live and work, they won't be in a position to take the appropriate actions as individuals, as businesses, as farmers, as fishers, or just as concerned citizens interacting with their government on how best to respond to this challenge. The response to the challenge obviously includes multiple elements. Many of them were laid out by the President in his Climate Action Plan released last June. But within the framework of the National Climate Assessment, a very important part of the focus is on what we can do to reduce vulnerability, increase preparedness and resilience, adapt to the changes that are coming. As part of that, how we put this information out there in forms that people can use to make decisions on how to reduce their own vulnerability is crucial. This involves something called the Climate Data Initiative and another element called the Climate Resilience Toolkit. And to talk about those, I'm going to turn the podium over to my friend and colleague, the Administrator of NOAA, the Undersecretary of Commerce, Dr. Kathy Sullivan.
Thank you, John, and I'll take my turn in thanking Mayor Cownie and the good citizens of both Des Moines and Iowa. Sorry, Freudian slip, Paula. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I almost said the wrong 4-letter state. What a delightful community, what a great community of practice, clearly already underway and doing really wonderful work here. So thank you for the welcome. As Dr. Holdren said, it's quite an extensive and exhaustive report. The 3 flavors available, I was pleased to hear today from our colleagues on the task force, are already proving quite useful. The granularity, the splits by regions and sectors provides a much better toehold for citizens, for local leaders at these different levels, to take the information, really see it in their terms through their lenses and begin to put it into practice. But it, of course, is underpinned by a tremendous amount of data. Recent data synthesized in the report itself, and then stores of data, repositories of data in the archives and the collections of the federal family going back quite some way. One of the new challenges that we're moving forward to tackle per the President's direction is how to put all of those data more readily in the hands of our partners here and indeed of every citizen. So we're working at NOAA in partnership with our colleagues at NASA both on a data initiative. Most of us are not data mavens. So the question is, what can we do to make these valuable stores of data more readily findable, searchable, accessible, usable to all of us, whether we want to use it for personal information, a governor's office or a mayor's office, or a clever entrepreneur that sees the possibility for a new data information service. How do we tee it up and plate it up in a more readily digestible fashion? So we're working on the data structure and architecture side of the equation, and we're also working to develop at least an initial set of tools, user-oriented, real-world problem-oriented information gathering and synthesis tools like interactive maps, for example, that will again let people begin to ingest this information into their decision-making framework to meet their needs. It's a very exciting, very dauntingly large challenge, but we're making, I think, some very good progress on it. I would say just one other thing. I've been delighted and really gratified to have a chance. I don't get to go to all of these. I'm very pleased to have been invited to come to this one and to hear in great detail, having read the report, really hear the conversations around the working groups that the task force has structured. We heard this morning from the Natural Resources and Agriculture Working Group, for example. And though we're in Iowa and though we call this planet Earth, we should all know it should have been named Aqua. We live on a watery planet, and even here in the heartland, things we do in the heartland affect our coastal zones tremendously, and there's a great dependence, at least in trade and transport, even here in the heartland, on our coastal ports, our coastal infrastructure, our coastal environment, to keep the whole of our country healthy and thriving from both an ecological and a social and an economic point of view. So I was very heartened to hear the clarity of focus that the Natural Resources and Agriculture Work Group has really on the broadest definition of that term and the way they're really driving in on coastal issues. It's going to help us at NOAA, and I know my colleagues across the federal family that also have coastal zone responsibilities and oceanic responsibilities. It's incredibly valuable for us to hear from leaders like this, where we're on the mark, where we're not on the mark, where their need is moving that we haven't countenanced yet. The other thing it's helping us do at the policy level is amplify and accelerate and make even easier the work that many times our employees and associates are doing at the working level. So I spent some of yesterday, for example, at the National Weather Service Forecast Office, a NOAA entity just north of town here, and in the same room talking together as teammates as if they were on the same Super Bowl team. We're two of Secretary Jewell's employees from the United States Geological Survey involved in water resources, representative from the Army Corps of Engineers, Iowa State Emergency Management, and Safeguard Iowa Partnership. These folks are living the real world challenge of keeping this state and their hurt people living wisely and well here in their environment. They know it takes all of them stitching the fabric together. They do it brilliantly. And so for the likes of me from a senior policy level to have a chance to come out, meet them, hear from the elected leaders at these levels, helps me know where I can take barriers out or work within the federal family to make all of that good work even easier and even more effective. And I now have the great honor and privilege of introducing another Heartland state leader, Governor Pat Quinn from the fine state of Illinois. Governor?
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I'm really glad to be here in Iowa, and I think this building is a perfect example of recycling and repurposing a building. The ultimate of recycling is not demolishing buildings, but taking buildings that were built before and repurposing them for this century. So we really want to salute the people of Des Moines and Iowa and Frank, your leadership. I think it's really special that we're here. We have so many different agencies of government that are represented. I've gone to all of the task force meetings. The first one was in Washington, D.C. Then we went out to Los Angeles. Here we are in the heartland in Iowa, right next to Illinois. And we understand that we are the heart of the heartland because Illinois and Iowa are year after year the leaders in growing corn and soybeans all across our two states, and then we're helping feed the world, and it's important that we do it in a sustainable way. And I think it's important to understand that we are working together. We have a collegial group that gets along, and we understand what severe weather really does to the people and businesses and farmers of our two states and our whole country. Because just in Illinois in the last couple of years, but 2 years ago, we had a drought in the summer of 2013 or 2012 was pretty rough. Then a year or so later, last spring, we had a terrible flood that afflicted 49 counties, including counties right along the Mississippi River, our border between Iowa and Illinois. And then last November, it was unheard of, we had deadly tornadoes in November, killer tornadoes of very ferocious strength, and took lives and demolished the whole town of Washington, Illinois. And then this past winter was no day at the beach either. We had a very severe winter, and anybody who sees potholes knows what those winter storms can do. And so I think that kind of brings home to everybody that severe weather is something we got to pay attention to. And I got up this morning in Springfield, Illinois. I live in the governor's mansion that Abraham Lincoln once visited all the time. He helped build the mansion, and we have an Abraham Lincoln bed there. But what we want to do in Illinois is engage the people of our state in this mission of a lifetime, that all of us have a role to play. If we're going to do something about this severe weather and protect ourselves and our businesses, we've got to do it together. We have everyone in and nobody left out. So our mansion, executive mansion in Springfield, we have rain garden there to help preserve water. We have rain barrels so that we take the rain when it comes and use that for the gardens and fountains and everything we've got in the mansion. And we just this year put in not only a garden we've had for some time, but now we have chickens. Chickens are there. We believe in local food production. And I think it's important that we, all of us, wherever we live, in whatever part of America we live, find specific concrete ways that we are part of the team. And that's what this is all about. This gathering is going to have a lot of concrete, practical things that everyday people and everyday businesses can do to help deal with all this issue about climate change and being resilient. But the bottom line is, we know when severe weather comes, we got to be ready. We don't want to have people flooded out. Our Mississippi River that Illinois and Iowa share, that's a mighty river, the biggest river in our state, our country, and it's very important that all of our water we take good care of. And a fellow who used to live along the Mississippi River more than 100 years ago, Mark Twain, he said, "Whiskey's for drinking and water's worth fighting for." Thank you.
I want to echo what Governor Quinn just said. You know, it's all of us working together that's going to make this important impact across this country. It's a bipartisan effort. When we go to floods, it doesn't matter whether we're, quite frankly, Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians or Socialists or Communists, we've got to deal with the issues. And we've got to do it right now, and our constituents expect us to do that. And I think that one of the things that not only moves us forward nationally, but it also makes a statement internationally, is I know the President has worked so hard on the international level and dealing with the United Nations and talking about what the next protocol looks like. We can show that we're leaders, that we are looking at state government, federal government, local government, and how we all work together to tackle this problem of our generation. And I know that just a week or two ago, Mayor Brainerd and I participated in a panel, local government perspective on climate change and some of the things that we're doing in our local places. And Mayor Hartwell and I were in Warsaw and represented local government from a United States perspective on some of the things that we think are important in doing it. So we are proud to take this effort forward and talk to the rest of the world about the efforts that we're making locally, statewide, nationally, to put a focus on it and actually do some things that are going to make a difference. So let's quickly open it up for some questions, if anybody has any, and I'm sure looking at the folks who are in the room that everybody's going to be quiet, there won't be a question at all, but here's one. Would like to take that one.
Well, I'll take a shot at tangible effects. The National Climate Assessment, when it looked at the heartland, found a number of things already happening that are having effects on people's lives. One of them is more of the overall precipitation is coming down in extreme events. There are more downpours, more deluges, which means both that more of the water is lost to storm runoff rather than soaking into the soil, and it means increased flood risk. A second thing that's happening in this part of the country is increased duration and intensity of hot spells. You know, it's interesting, there are some benefits of climate change for agriculture. The growing season is longer, that's good. There's more CO2, that's a nutrient, that's good. But on the bad side, crops, corn and soybeans particularly, are susceptible, very susceptible to extremes of heat. And those extremes of heat offset the advantages that one is getting from longer growing seasons and more CO2. Other aspects that are important, we're getting a longer growing season, but we're also getting a longer allergy season. We're getting, because of hotter weather, more extreme air pollution episodes. We're getting a spread of the geographic range of the ticks that propagate Lyme disease. So in terms of direct impacts on health, those are already occurring. Direct impacts on agriculture are occurring. Direct impacts on water are occurring. As to how soon we can see results, I'm going to turn that over to Mike Boots.
I will just say two quick things on that. I think the president clearly recognizes the real threats that are out there as it relates to climate change, and released, as several folks have said, a climate action plan last summer to address those impacts. A big part of that relates to addressing carbon pollution and making sure that as a country we're tackling that problem, which is a great and significant source of climate change. And so there are a number of steps we're taking at the federal level in partnership with states and local governments and the private sector to tackle that, including really expanding our investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency, but also addressing the carbon pollution that comes from a number of sources across this country. And so we're doing our part on that. The folks that are here are also trying to tackle addressing the impacts that Dr. Holdren just described on a very real level at the local and state and tribal level. And so what the president has asked this set of folks to do is to provide recommendations on ways that the federal government can modernize our programs and be better partners to support the work that's happening at the local level. And so this task force is going to be providing some recommendations to the president this fall. And our hope is that we, as a federal government, can respond quickly to those recommendations and take action.
And I would just point out that the reason these folks were selected to be on this task force is that many of them are already taking great actions. And I think the citizens in Des Moines and Illinois and Carmel, Indiana, and Santa Barbara County and Salt Lake City, I think those citizens are already feeling the impact of positive action at the state and local level. And as Mike said, our effort here is to take what's being done state and local and at the tribal level and accelerate it and make it happen faster.
Encouraged a strengthened renewable fuel standard. Was there any discussion on the RFS during this meeting, and where, whoever wants to take that, I assume somebody from the Interior, but.
No specific discussion of that here today. I will say when I spoke with the governor last week and told him I was coming, he's out today fulfilling his pledge to visit every county in Iowa every year that he's in office. Which is quite an accomplishment. He's very proud of that, justifiably so, but he did mention that to me when we spoke.
Yeah, but I know Terry very well. As a matter of fact, we're trying to build a train from Chicago to Quad Cities, then over to Iowa City where there's a university, and then on to Des Moines, and maybe even over to Omaha. So we need Governor Branstad and folks in the Iowa legislature to see the benefit of high-speed rail, because we're doing it in Illinois. We're building Chicago to St. Louis. We want to get Cub fans down to Busch Stadium a little bit faster. And hopefully they come back happier. But we're also going to build Chicago to Detroit. So we want to do Chicago to Des Moines, but we got to get everybody in. And so part of sustainability and efficiency and saving money on fuel is to have a balanced approach, and that includes trains, and we believe in trains. There's a Rock Island line, and we're building that right now, but we want to go across the Mississippi River and at least get to Iowa City first of all.
So my name's Bob Percisepe. I work at EPA, and I just wanted to say a couple things about some of those points that you brought up about the governor. One is that we're really talking about climate resilience and how to deal with the impacts that we're already feeling. But on the other side of the president's plan for climate, there's a number of other actions to mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases. One of them is cleaner, more fuel-efficient automobiles, and working with the Department of Transportation and local governments, state governments, particularly California. We put together a program that will double fuel economy in the United States by 2025. You go backwards, that's cutting in half the emissions of greenhouse gases from light-duty vehicles in the United States. We're working to get done a proposal by early June, June 1st or 2nd. I think the 1st is a Sunday. So a proposal on how to work with states on plans to reduce emissions from electric generation of existing power plants. And on renewable fuels have become a growing important part of our ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we will continue to rely on renewable fuels for part of the strategy overall nationally to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Bob?
All right, we'll take another one real quickly. I just want to second the motion here by the governor in Illinois that we work on rail. We know it reduces the cost of shipping a ton of goods in and out of Iowa about 75–80% per ton by using rail as opposed to motor freight. We need the motor freight certainly to get us to rail heads where we can offload and get it in a tanker. But question was coming out of somewhere right here.
It was right here. Hi, I'm Dury, Iowa Public Radio. First, Bob, I was wondering if you could pronounce your last name for us again. I'm sorry,
Bob,
I have
you're
the
up.
same problem with my last name, but I want to make sure I get it right.
Perciasepi.
Perciasepi. Okay. Thank you. But no, but I need you to.
He'll be available afterwards. Okay,
Okay.
next question.
Then my actual question was for Director Agnew. How do you folks work with people in Washington, some of them representatives from our state, who don't believe that the country should invest money in addressing climate change without an international agreement to do so?
Well, I would just say that the work that we're all doing together, as I believe Mike said, plays an important role in the international discussion, and communities are taking action right now. And this effort is to accelerate that, and I think that has important implications for how the international conversation unfolds. And so I know Secretary Kerry believes very deeply that the work of state and local and tribal leaders is important for him as he negotiates and has discussions internationally. And so I think from my perspective, we just want to do as good a job as possible in helping state, local, and tribal governments do this climate preparedness and resilience work well.
Let me give a local perspective on that one. I appreciate you asking David about that, but let me give you a quick local government perspective on it. If you've read the climate assessment, it's a little scary. If you read the IPCC report, it's a little scary. It's a global issue. It's not just the United States. We're a huge contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. We need to take care of it, but each and every city, each and every town, each and every state, not only in this country but around the world, needs to begin to take action. And I think we've always been leaders. It's time for us to step up as leaders, and we're showing that initiative through this group right here. And we're going to show some recommendations to this administration, which I'm sure they're going to follow through on many of them, and we're going to take that action and show the rest of the world we can do it. Next question.
Des Moines Register.
Governor Quinn, how would you imagine that your work, the recommendations, will affect those farmers in Iowa and Illinois?
Well, I think we need to have a team effort, because our agriculture is so mighty in both states and so important to our economies. In our state, agribusiness and agriculture account for about 40% of our economy. So we really respect the men and women in agriculture. I think they have already shown us how they are good stewards of the land and the water. More and more sustainable agriculture, no-till agriculture. We have a program going on right now in Illinois about cover crops that have been well received by our farmers across Illinois. All of our universities that are involved in agricultural research are working on this whole mission. And so I think there's a lot of things that we can pilot in Illinois and Iowa and show not only the nation but the world what sustainable agriculture is all about. We want to make sure that we don't have so much fertilizer that it gets into our water, that it gets into the Mississippi River, and the next thing you know, it's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think I have found in my time both as lieutenant governor and governor that our farmers in particular are leaders when it comes to sustainability and respecting the land, the water, and the air. So we really want to exemplify that leadership in our Midwest region and across our country, in our world, because we are feeding the world. There's so many different parts of our state and Iowa as well that are growing crops that go exported around the world and help feed a lot of people and a lot of animals, and we want to make sure we continue to do that in a positive way.
All right, I want to thank everybody. That will conclude our press conference, and we keep your eye on us. We're going to continue to work. Thanks for coming.
Good job there, Frank. Well done.
Good job.
Okay, very good.